Hi there to you. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back here. And today, well, I've been lucky enough to sit down in conversation with the gentleman who's often considered to be at the forefront of the hobby over in the US. Ken Patterson, of course, from What's Neat this week. And it was great to get a moment to sit down and just ask him a whole load of questions, not just about the hobby, but a few other things besides. So come with me in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories, and Railroads of Sheffield, your one-stop shop for US outline modelling in the UK. And let's see what Ken had to say. Hi there, how are you doing? And that is an amazing backdrop there behind you. I'm looking at your model room, and I think everybody watching this is going to look at that and just be like, wow, that is an amazing collection of stuff. And of course, you've got the Bachmann large G scale Emily there in front of you. They're, of course, very, very popular in the UK. But you've also, I see you've got an awful lot of US outline HO scale on the shelves there. That is an amazing collection, gosh. But
Stuff just keeps showing up, Jennifer. These manufacturers keep sending product, and I had to build more shelf space just to hold it all.
that is a great problem to have, I have to say. But look, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. And for the benefit of our viewers, some of whom may not have seen What's Neat this week, I have been sharing it out there. But tell us a little bit about yourself and the show and what else you do within the hobby.
I've been doing What's Neat for Model Railroad Hobbyist magazine. That's an online magazine that Joe Fugate has been putting together. I want to guess, I don't know what year he started that. It was way before 2010. And I joined around 2012. And I asked him, I said, what do you say that I do a monthly column for you, Joe? And I'll just set it up at a standard price every single month. You send me this money, and I will make sure that I send you content of what my latest photo shoot is with any one various manufacturer that I might be working with here in the US. And at the time, I was working with a lot of them. I've worked for Wathers and Atlas and Bachmann. I've been with Bachmann for like 23 years. And then, they come and go. It depends on what, it's like any other business. As management changes, your accounts change. So, for example, presently on the What's Neat podcast, we no longer have Athearn supporting the hobby through our show because they've hired new management since Chris Palomares has left, and they've got a different ideology on how to sell trains. And so it changes like the wind. But to make a long story short, I started doing stuff for Joe Fugate in 2012, and then I bought a video camera. And I was like, do you know what a great presentation you can make on video as compared to a still photographic camera. Generally, the magazines would only allow you to have 8 pictures in any one given article that might be 5 pages long. And you could only say so much with 8 still photographs. But with a video camera, 1 minute of video shows so much more than 8 pictures. So if you do a 15-minute video segment, and then you might have 5 video segments in that complete show presentation on 5 subjects. What a better way to present the hobby to the modeler out there. So that's kind of, it transversed and changed. It went from the still photograph column that I wanted to have to a video show. And I've produced 100 of those shows as of now for Model Railroad Hobbyist magazine. And then back in 2017, Chris Palomares, who at the time worked for Athearn, had the brilliant idea of, you need to do a weekly show. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Where would I get the time to do that? And he lined us up on this wall. He pointed a camera at us and said, start talking and smile. He said, smile. So in show number 1, it's like, smile, Patterson, smile. And after about 11 podcast shows, I discovered that, yes, this is a good idea because I could draw people into the model railroad hobbyist video that I make every month. And eventually, as you build up an audience and you have retention weekly, people look forward to something every week. If it's pleasant, if it brings them pleasure, if it's informative, and it's professional. In other words, it's got good presentation, good professional. What's the word we use for good video? Polished. Anyway, if you've got really good editing and very good presentation, you get a repeat audience and you literally create something that people look forward to every single week, which is what has happened. And once you build up your audience to a certain level, at that point, you can start bringing in advertisers so that they can present their products on the show, which will give you a much more diverse presentation overall of the new news in the hobby and help build up the show, because now you've got a budget where you can buy equipment, you can buy better computers, you can buy better microphones, you can buy a better set. And all of it keeps snowballing. So the snowball keeps getting bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill. And I don't know where this is going to go or lead to. I would love to see it lead to us having what you have in the UK with that Great Model Railroad Challenge show, so that we could be on mainstream television rather than just simply on YouTube.
That's brilliant. And yeah, I mean, like you say, I mean, it's from humble beginnings, you've actually built a very loyal following. It's growing all the time, and I'm actually quite jealous sometimes when I see how big your views grow. But you know, it's testament to just how well produced the show is. And you know, I kind of ever since I discovered you a few years ago, I've kind of looked to you as being the inspiration for kind of what I'm trying to do in the UK. But I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about that later on in the interview. But first, I just really want to find out from you what first got you into model railroads. Where did it all begin for you?
When I was a child, my father was a model railroader. So I saw his trains. You know, I'm 2 years old, I'm 3 years old, I'm sitting in the basement, I'm seeing all of this stuff. And when I got to be about 4 or 5, I don't know what year it was, around 1969 or 1970, my father and my mother split up. And so there was no longer a father figure and there was no longer trains. So I'm guessing that the reason I like trains was my way to try to get back my father, if that makes any sense. Because I actually never really met my father until I got well into my 20s. I might have almost been 30 years old before I actually got to reunite with him and find out who he was and what an individual he was. You asked the question, that's the answer.
No, it's an interesting story. It's always a really interesting thing to kind of delve into where people's beginnings in the hobby come from. And I guess, you know, parents are always very, very influential. And in a way, I suppose it's nice that that's your memory from being very small of your father, and you know, it stayed with you. You know, I think that is a great story.
Oh, it did. All through fourth grade and fifth grade and all through high school, I was down playing with trains. I mean, literally trying to figure out how to make the models look more realistic and make them better and mechanically make them better. It was something that really occupied my time, so much so that I didn't pay much attention in school. In school, I was drawing pictures of trestles and bridges and scenery. I was not focused on learning like I was supposed to have been.
So, I mean, I take it then. I mean, did you have that period in? I know certainly for me, I reached a point where you go off to for me to university, to college, and you discover cars, you discover members of the opposite sex, and then later in life, I came back into the hobby. So was the hobby always there for you? Did that love never go away?
It was there. High school, I took the 5-year plan because I really didn't pay too much attention in high school, so I had to go to summer school just to get my diploma. But I never went to college either. I wasn't interested in school anymore. I got out on the street and I started buying and selling real estate. I wanted to make money. I knew I knew business. They can't teach you business in school. They can teach you ethics. They can teach you the basic properties of business. But the way to really learn how to make money is to get out there and be dependent upon whether you starve or whether you eat this month based on your productivity. So I learned very quickly about real estate in this country and how to buy and sell and flip and invest in real estate, which you don't need a college education to do. You just need to actually jump in the water and swim, and either you drown or you swim. And I swam. I did very well in that business. So after high school, there was also a period of time where, yes, I was dating girls. And of course, at that point, trains take the back seat. So I want to say there was about a 2-year hiatus where the layout that I had was collecting dust. It was getting dirty. Yeah, I was focused on cars, girls, nice dates, and the excitement of who are all these different personalities that you meet. Because as you meet a mate in life, you discover there's all types of, it's like a menu at a restaurant. There's all types of personalities, and you figure out what it is that you're compatible with. So that took a period of time away from the trains. And then when I met my awesome wife, Michelle, that I've been married to for 30 years, and she loves you, and you've met her, and you guys get along great. I love that.
Oh, thank you.
When I met Michelle, that's when I really got back into trains. Not that she was boring, but because now I was sort of settled down. I had a good life going together. I was buying and selling houses. I had income. And that's when I started that Midwest Valley Modelers Model Railroad Club. It was a modular layout that we wanted it to be very professional, a very beautiful presentation, well lit, and super realistic looking based on American railroad prototypes, i.e. the Santa Fe between Chicago and Kansas City, double track main line, Midwest farmland type scenery. And that layout we did 50 some shows with, and it was a very professional, awesome layout. It was also around that time that I started doing photography on the side for the model manufacturers to try to make a living at this. So in 1997, I closed my real estate company. Not that I was going broke or that I was unsuccessful in that business. It's that I just didn't want to be on the street all day long, driving between buildings and trying to chase bank repossessions in the middle of the night. I wanted a more settled down lifestyle so that we could actually eventually start having children. I didn't want my children to be raised in an environment of they had to be taken somewhere all day long to be babysat or taught at a pre-kindergarten, pre-level, kindergarten type of environment. I wanted to be able to stay home and raise my children and watch them grow up. And that being in the train industry, working in my basement, afforded me that opportunity to watch them grow up, which is better than money itself. So in 1997, I closed my real estate company for good, and I started working full-time trying to get train accounts. I would go to the trade shows. I would dress in a suit. I would take my portfolio with me. I would be very professional with these people, just as I was in real estate. I took all my business skills I learned in buying and selling buildings and brought them to the hobby. I was doing magazine articles for all the magazines. I've got like 175 covers in the American Model Press. And I've done 400 plus magazine articles that would supplement my income, in addition to doing work for Wathers and Bachman and Atlas. And, just go through the manufacturers. You would get a couple of jobs every year from each one of them that would help add up and supplement your income so that you could feed your family. I also got involved with Burlington Northern Santa Fe's lawyers, and I started building courtroom models for the law firms. Whenever they had a big accident or something where they wanted to show the jury at a court trial the obvious, what happened here. The easiest way to do that isn't with graphs and paper. It's with a three-dimensional model of the scene, of the wreck, of the circumstances, or whatever it is, to point out the obvious to make their point. And so I built every 18 months or every 12 months, they would call me up and have me build a model for them for the courts. So between doing all of those things all at once, it gave me a job. I created a job out of nothing down here.
That's a really interesting, and some of the things you say there as well about having a first career and then looking for a way into the hobby. I think there's a lot of people who would love to make their hobby their job, and in a way, yours is like the real success story of being able to take what you love and turn it into a job that that you can support yourself and your family with. And I just love to hear that, because That's exactly what I would love to do as well. So hopefully you maybe you're about 25 years ahead of me, maybe. But yeah,
It's
that
not that
is.
wrong, Jennifer. I'm not that far ahead of you. You're already there. You're doing it. Your show, you've got sponsors. You're in a different environment in the UK. In the United States, I'm surrounded by so many model companies. In the UK, your country is only a portion of the size of the US,
Hmm.
so that you've got only so many model companies you can bring in. Now you've got to go to Germany, you got to go to France, you've got to go internationally, other countries, in order to bring sponsors so you can get 10 or 12 or 14 good sponsors on your show. The
Hmm.
magic of what's going on now is we've discovered the mom and pops, the smaller companies, which is really what our whole hobby is made of. The startup companies, the guy that decides he wants to make roadbed for trains, and that's the only thing he specializes in. The gentleman that is specializing only in 3D printers, that's his specialty. So we found that these smaller companies can't afford to really advertise in the mainstream big magazines and spend $3,000 or $8,000 for a page in Model Railroad or magazine for a full page ad. And if they get the smaller business size card ads at the end of the magazine, how good does that do? Does that really get you the attention you need to be successful? But if they come to us, we can promote and share their product in only 2 or 3 minutes during a show and give the viewer a new outlook on something they've never seen before or they don't understand because it's a business card side ad in a magazine. We can give a good presentation. The person pays us a little bit of money for that. They definitely get their money's worth because whoever these people are that watches our podcast, they do spend money. And they support our show by doing it that way. And then these sponsors, they come back and they spend more money. Since COVID has hit, we've got one gentleman that sells jackets and embroidered clothing, which is, he made this shirt for me with the logos on it and everything. Um, that gentleman was dependent upon doing simply train shows to make a living. And there are no train shows. There haven't been for a year and a half right now. So how does he make a living? He's been coming to us. We tested his stuff on the show. He made us apparel and garb for the show, jackets and shirts. And then he makes 1,400 other different railroad logos for American railroads, the old ones that are gone and the new ones that are still currently functioning. So he's got an array of products, but with no train shows, he didn't have any way to sell them. And so we would pitch his products on our show and show how beautiful they are. I would make him a little separate 7 or 8 minute television commercial that he could run on social media for himself because we've got the video equipment to do that. And by doing it that way, we've created a base for him to make money right now. Not like he was with train shows. He's not making, 80 or $90,000 a year that he used to do on the train shows, but he's making enough to survive COVID with us. And he keeps coming back every month. These small companies keep coming back and saying, wow, last month in 2 days, we had 28 people call us up wanting to buy our highway road signs. Well, rock and roll. Come back next month and let's do it again. And it's working all by itself. That part of the business is working.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I found is that it's very, very effective form of advertising, and it's perennial. Once the video is out there, people do keep coming back, keep watching it. New people find it, and that advert, rather than just being in an issue of a magazine, which then it's no longer stole, disappears. That advert is always there, and you don't have to keep paying for it to run because it just runs itself. And I know in the UK we've got a lot of smaller manufacturers, like you're saying, the the one man bands that are bringing out very specific, very niche products. But it's a great way of being able to make people aware of your product. And in many respects, that's half the battle. Is that people can't buy your product if they don't know it exists. What kind of era and locations is it that you like to model? I mean, do you go very, very specific, or do you have quite a varied interest in modeling?
I modeled the Santa Fe Railroad, and I really loved the yellow bonnets that ran through the Midwest and out in California. I love desert scenery. So starting out when I was in, I want to say just around high school and thereafter, I was big time into Santa Fe. The Midwest Valley Modelers layout was based on a Santa Fe double track main line, again between Chicago and Kansas City. So that flavor of that layout took on that visual look, and that's primarily the type of models that I would purchase. Now, fast forward to doing ad photography for the manufacturers, I started buying books because when Bachmann sends you a Pennsylvania steam locomotive, you've got to know what that territory where those type of engines ran. When
Yeah.
you get a Norfolk Southern, they yell at me for saying Norfolk and Southern, but you get a Norfolk Southern locomotive, for example, the black ones with the horses on it. Well, those run in a demographic area where the soil is more red. That part of the country has got iron in the soil. So when you look at the scenes of the South of Huntsville, Alabama, and the southern areas where that railroad ran, now all of a sudden it's a different colored dirt to create the scenery with, and different color ballots. So what I did was I unmasked a very large book collection, and this is before the internet took hold. Where when I worked for these manufacturers, I would start modeling all sorts of railroads across the entire country. You never knew what you were going to get, but in order for the photograph to be credible and look realistic, um, you had to follow the location and what those models looked like in the territory they ran in. The architecture of the buildings would change from California to the Midwest. All of those things I would take into consideration to make a realistic, credible photograph. And so now, Jennifer, I probably model a lot of different railroads and know how to do so. You got to figure when we're creating ad photography for the model press, I've got a philosophy on that. And there's two ways to describe it. I hope I don't lose my train of thought. When you go through the frozen food section at your grocery store, all the frozen refrigerators have got all this food that you throw it in the microwave. Well, the boxes are beautiful. It's so beautiful that the green beans and the peas and the meat and the gravy and the potatoes, it looks so beautiful in the photographs that you're literally tasting the food through your eyes at the grocery store as you're walking down the aisle. And then you open up the box and you see what's actually inside of it. It's a bunch of hunks of ice. It doesn't look anything like the picture until you cook it. That's what I try to do with the model railroad photography. I try to create a serving suggestion that shows how good or how realistic or how credible the models will look when you get them home. They look just like the real pictures that you're used to seeing, or if you're out rail fanning and you're seeing them in the real world, I try to create the same image as what they look like the way you're used to seeing them. Because if we can convey the message that these Bachmann locomotives can look that good, then you're probably going to be thinking about that. It's going to stick in your mind. And the next time you go to the hobby shop, that's the model you're going to pick up. Because, see, the goal is all we have to do is get into the modeler's imagination. If we can get into that space in their head, our ad will run in their mind all day long. Because simply the imagination hasn't got a limit on time, and the imagination doesn't have a budget. Once you're in that space, you win. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much. And it's one of the things that I found myself that I do a lot of video reviews. And when I do that, it's like you say, you're putting yourself in the mindset of what the modeler wants to see. So um, it's trying to show them the model as if they're holding it in their own hands, looking at it the way that they would look at it. What are they looking for? Which bits of it do they really want to see? And then always try and show it running through a model landscape. I mean, in the UK, we're quite lucky that one kind of landscape sort of fits all because we're like a very small state in the US. We don't have to contend with everything from lush pine forests right through to desert. So by having it running through an actual model landscape in the mind's eye, people even who haven't necessarily built their layout yet are already thinking, oh man, this is going to look great on my model. And they'll buy it long before they build the model to run it on. And it's like you say, it's that picture on the box that sells the frozen lasagna. It looks amazing on the box, and that when you actually eat it, it's not quite going to look like that. But that picture on the box is what sells it. So I absolutely hear where you're coming from with that. But I'm also really interested. So, with a guy who's got, I mean, I can see behind you this vast collection of models. Is there one model that for you really stands out? If somebody said to you, you know,
Uh,
you've got,
you're going to do that to me, aren't you?
yeah, the house is burning down, you can only save one model. Which is the one which for you you think actually now that there's something really special about that?
But I picked two.
Okay, you can have two.
Okay. I would pick my HO scale small switch engines for switching, a pair of those, and or I would pick my narrow gauge steam locomotives that ran in the gold mines of the 1870s through 1890s.
Oh, right.
Because if I had just those, then I could either model a gold mine railroad, which would be awesome. And I've done that. I built one and then I sold it. But I love narrow gauge. And I also love just a 6 foot long layout that I can switch on. So give me two switch engines and a couple freight cars, and I'll let all of this go away.
I'll be there with the removal van next week. You can keep the switches, I'll take the rest of it. But
And
it,
you got to figure one more thing. It looks like there's a lot of great models down here, but so many of these models, they don't run. They don't have motors in them. These are pre-production photographic samples. So while it looks great, don't. That's one thing about we don't have to worry about thieves coming over and taking these because these are useless. There's not. They're empty shells.
well, when they show up on eBay, you know exactly where they've gone. 'Cause you're like, yeah, that's that pre-production model they took.
And that would be another problem too that I always thought about. If somebody came here and you worry about that. You worry about you're showing all off your stuff to the whole world on the internet. Oh my God, isn't that dangerous? Well, who's going to stand around and wait for people to put all this stuff back in their box? I mean, if you're a thief, you want to get in and out quick. You're going to be here for days boxing this stuff up because if you throw it in a big box or a bag, you're going to ruin it. You're not going to get any value out of it. It'll all be broken up. So this isn't really something you want to come in and steal. It would be a very futile, useless attempt to make money. So don't waste your time with that. Plus, I do have a good pitchfork down here, so just in case.
For the US, I must admit, you showed me your rifle on the last interview.
We in America do have a lot of guns in this country too. It's a
Yeah,
little it's a
I
little
mean,
crazy. That's why we never get into politics on the show. On our show, we never talk about that because there's no way to win. There's no right answer in that department.
I'm absolutely the same, and I think with a hobby like model railroading, it's a nice escape from stuff like that. The real life has got all the politics, all the arguments. At least with this hobby, the only thing we can argue about is the number of rivets on a model.
Boy, they argue about that too, don't they?
I think you have rivet counters in the US as well. That's what we call them over here, the rivet
That's
counters.
yeah. We have those here. They actually generally tend to make your modeling better. If you listen to what they say, a lot of times they're generally right. And if you're really, really trying hard to be better, it's not a bad thing. Don't take it as an insult. Don't get upset. Just listen and weigh it out for what it's worth in your mind.
Oh wow! I'm glad that we're not alone. I want to turn a little bit back to we touched on the change in technology. You talked about pre-internet days, but how do you think that the rise of social media, YouTube, all the other things like the Zoom call that we're on now has changed the hobby in terms of maybe putting people in touch, but also changing expectations and also the information that can be found.
It has changed the hobby in that it's made it more accessible. You don't have to just go to the hobby shop or the grocery store and pick up a magazine and then you're limited to those pages and those pictures that are only presented. Obviously, with YouTube, it's given us, you and I both, a platform that we would have never otherwise had before 2005. And if YouTube ever goes away, we have to get a new job because immediately what we're doing is going to stop. So in the old days, if you wanted to broadcast, you would have to put in my backyard a 200 or 300 foot tall antenna. You would have to have a production studio and computers and technicians that know how to work that antenna. How much does that cost? And then you could only broadcast within a 300 or 400 or 500 mile range of your demographic location. That was your reach. With YouTube, obviously, we now have a worldwide reach. I've got viewers in Obviously, the UK is a big one. Australia is another big demographic we have. Kuwait, the Middle East, Russia, Germany, France. We have viewers. 20% of our audience is international. Um, we could have never reached those people without this introduction of social media, computers, and YouTube. Not to mention the prices dropped. You could anybody could buy a camera, a video camera, an editing suite, and a computer, and literally in a month be in business creating your own show. It just depends on how hard you work and how dedicated you want to be with it. I work 7 days a week. This is my job. I work 10, 14, 18 hours a day. I only sleep when I have to because I want this to be good. I want to be able to feed my children and keep my wife happy and smiling. I want what everybody else wants in life. I want security. I want a roof over our head. I want to be able to feed them. And this affords me that because I feel like I can talk, just like you said earlier in our pre interview. I can actually talk. I feel like I can sell. I feel very comfortable now when the cameras are running because I simply ignore them and I just try to be myself. And I've got a natural tendency to when I believe in something and I understand something, I can convey that information in sort of a way that, depending upon the experience level of the person I'm talking to, I can convey it to them so they can understand it. If you've got that, then you've got a show. Does that make sense? But it's the technology, obviously, that's brought it in where you and I can all do this. You've taught me so much with regards to doing a live show that I can't wait to get started doing it. And I would have never known that had I not even met you or talked to you.
Wow. So, yeah, because I told you about the Streamdeck, which actually, in all fairness, somebody
Yeah.
else told me about that and said, hey, actually, this will make your life easier. But I mean, it's a great way to go. The immediacy of connecting with an audience. And
Mhm.
certainly at the moment, this last year, because people haven't been able to get out and about, there hasn't been shows, they can't go to model rail clubs because everything is shut down. And even at the moment, we can't even go to a model shop because they're not allowed to have people in. It's been that last lifeline that's kept people connected. And I remember hearing somebody say, just say if we'd have gone through this pandemic 20 years ago, it would have been absolute hell. I mean, you could imagine an entire year where you just can't realistically communicate with other people within your hobby, within your social group. It would have been unreal. So it's almost like if there is a perfect time for it to turn up, I guess we kind of had the technology to get through it.
It has definitely helped. If we were limited to only the TV and the radio that we had 25 or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, like you say, there would have been chaos.
Yeah.
People would not have listened, and they don't listen now. Look, there's a lot of people that don't wear masks now, but the UK compared to where I am, and it changes where I am in the United States. The West Coast, the East Coast, they're much more strict than the Midwest, and the cases are much higher in New York and in California than they are in the Midwest. I don't know why that is. Maybe we're more of a sparse population. So our hobby shops have been able to stay open. Um, the curbside service, there's a lot to that. All of the companies that sell on the internet, all of the manufacturers in the United States have been experiencing Christmas, is one way to describe it. Christmas sales for the entire 13 months that we've been going through this. Sales in our hobby have been going through the roof. They can hardly keep up with it. It's been very, very good for our business. On the other hand, if you're in the train show business, those guys at Randy Bachman and Dave Swanson that ran the world's greatest hobby and the great American train shows in this country, that's got to be very difficult for those gentlemen. I put a call into them one day to see how they're doing, and I never heard back from them. But they used to do 2 train shows every weekend in a different part of the country, one in Texas, one in Louisiana. Every weekend they would do 2 shows, and that was a very good business for them. And that just came to a screeching halt. So parts of our hobby have been super good. Parts of it have been, dead. With regards to us producing shows for YouTube, I want to say that our viewership has gone up 30% because of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I found very much the same. And also, when you talk to retailers and manufacturers, it's almost this sort of feeling of people quite embarrassed to admit that actually it's been a great year for the hobby in terms of people buying product. Because I guess people are stuck at home, they can't go on foreign holidays, they can't go out to restaurants. So you've got to have something to kill the time. And a lot of people have rediscovered hobbies, including making models. But I also wanted to ask you a little bit about how new technology within the models themselves, how do you think that has changed the outlook of modeling? And has it helped bring new people into the hobby? I'm thinking here things like DCC control, sound, but also like lighting, all these sort of things that in the past you could do some of them, but it was a lot more difficult to do. Has that changed the hobby?
Well, it's definitely changed the hobby with regards to the models being more interesting. I don't know that it's brought more people into the hobby because you generally come into this hobby because you've seen a train go by as a child, or you've seen a train go by in real life. Or another thing that really drives hobby sales are books. If you go through a book and you see train pictures, all of a sudden you start wanting everything that's in that book that you've seen. Oh, I can buy a Pennsylvania T1, or I can buy, a big boy locomotive, or a Northern, or a Union Pacific turbine, for example. Um, the Flying Scotchman. I should just be talking about the UK models too, because there's so many interesting models that the UK has got. That if you go through books of your past history of railroads, you look at that beautiful blue steam engine, and all of a sudden you want one on your layout. I think that's what drives a lot of sales are books and the real prototype. Now, whether they had DCC and fancy lighting in them or not, I don't think that really would have made a difference as to whether you'd want it. You would still want it no matter what type of technology was in it. Now, fast forward to what you just said about the technology. Obviously, lighting and sound and the ability to run multiple trains independent of each other on your layout using DCC, which the very first time I saw that was back in 1978 at a department store here in St. Louis, a Marklin train set. Marklin was pushing DCC back in the late 70s. So that technology was already starting to come on board. It didn't take really mainstream in this country until about 1995, 97, early 2000s when DCC in this country got big, because we were all good with our DC power packs and our layout tracks broken up into blocks, because I only wanted to run one train at a time anyway. I never really was into operation. I was into the run by effect, where I wanted to model a scene that I saw in real life perfectly and then watch a train go through that scene. And all of a sudden I won because it looks like what I just saw. That was the type of modeling I did. DCC has changed the game for operation. Now, a lot more people turn their layouts into a great big board game where they can have industries switching out a reason for the boxcar to go here and then leave again and then go to a different destination with a load in it. DCC has allowed us to do that with regards to the fact that you can run 2, 3, 5, 10 trains with multiple people at the same time. Never mind now we have internet video where you could actually run a train on my layout now through the internet and control it. I mean, that is far out fascinating to me. Not something I do, but it can be done. So technology has made the hobby more diverse. And I would assume that a lot of the younger folks that get into the hobby that like computers and like technology, they appreciate that as well.
Hmm.
I got to tell you what, my son is amazing. I mean, he was just born 5 minutes ago, right? It seems that way. And he is building me a supercomputer to produce the show on that I was told is going to make my life easy. How it's amazing how that works. How did he learn all of that? I have an in-house computer tech that I didn't even know I have. I got to put him on salary now.
Well, that's it. Children are always really good at that. I can remember as a small child being asked to program my dad's brand new VCR, and it was like that was easy to me then. And now it's like I think you reach about 30, and computers you're not allowed to understand them anymore, and then the next generation kicks in.
It makes me wonder how I got so dumb. I just don't. But yeah,
Yeah.
technology. Back to your question, technology has made things awesome for us, no doubt about it. I mean, the biggest thing was sound. The other big thing is lighting. The thing that I see coming that hasn't quite been mastered yet is smoke. If
Hmm.
you can make these steam engines smoke like the prototypes, and they can probably do that. I've got this vape pipe. I quit smoking cigarettes, thank you, Lord, but I started to vape. This vaping technology shows me a lot about what you can do with oil and water vapor and possibly make a steam locomotive smoke. So I see that being the next possible revolution in model railroading. And another thing that's going to be a big change, game changer in our hobby, we've already got DCC, but that technology is 25 years old now. Actually, Markland, again, back to 1977, do the math. That's 40 years old, okay? Nowadays, I see Bluetooth technology is the latest thing that you're going to start seeing change, where your locomotives can be automatically programmed sitting on the track from your computer through Bluetooth. So that if you need to do an update on your throttle or an update on your locomotives, it'll be automatic through that type of technology, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Those two technologies are also going to change our hobby a great deal with regards to what we're going to see coming out in the future, like in the next 6 to 9 to a year with the manufacturers.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting times. One of the other areas that's sometimes overlooked is the technology advances in other materials. I mean, I remember when I started out making models, it would have been in the 1980s, and scenery materials were very basic back then, certainly in the UK. But
Sawdust.
yeah, dyed sawdust. I don't know whether
Yeah.
you had to endure that in the US as well.
Right.
But when I see some of the stuff that comes through, especially from things like the Woodland Scenics range, the Subterrane range, I love that stuff. The Shaper sheet, the
Right.
things that actually making those realistic scenery more accessible, because these are things that make it easier. So you don't have to be an absolute expert at rock carving. You just get these rubber molds and cast them yourself. Have you seen that as being an amazing advance in the hobby?
One of the biggest advances in that I've seen is static grass.
Oh,
That's
yes.
Yes, that's pretty amazing. And then you've got the chemists. They created Ballast Bond. That's a company that's sold in the UK, in fact. Who makes Ballast Bond?
Deluxe materials, is that
Deluxe materials. And then they've got this powder glue that they can mix in with your ballast. So the chemists out there, the chemists that have specialized in the various types of plastic that they're able to create for the models that we're doing. That in itself too has obviously changed a bit. Yeah, static grass is a game changer for people's layouts. The different colors and the different lengths of nap. I still like to use teddy bear fake fur for my grass, but I've seen, static grass looks absolutely amazing when you see it in the pages of the magazines and how some of these various people have used it.
And it's actually, I've always found myself using it. I was one of these people who, for a great many years, went, "Oh no, I'm happy with what I've got." And then I tried it because I had a sponsor on board that just sent me all the stuff and went, "Look, try it out." And I was smitten with it. I used it for 30 seconds, and I was a big convert. Now I go around the world telling people they need to get into static grass, but the effects you can get are amazing. But at the same time, it's so easy to do. It's not like in days of yore where you had to really know your stuff to get these great effects. It's made it, in my eyes, very accessible to anybody, regardless of skill level, to create these really great landscapes. I'm surrounded up here by grassland that looks like grassland. I found it astounding.
You've nailed it, Jennifer. You've spelled it out exactly the way it is. What we do in this hobby is an art. And there's no such thing as a bad artist.
Hmm.
Every artist that makes their scenery and makes their layout look the way they like it to look, to them, it looks fantastic. And it doesn't matter what level you feel like you're on. I don't even think we can classify it as levels. As long as you're happy with what you've done and it makes you feel good, you win. You make them grin, we win. And that's the thing about the hobby is they've kept it simple in the scenery areas, and the ability to run these trains and lay your track is that it's all very basic and it's all very actually simple once you kind of learn the basic properties and principles of doing things, to the point where no matter how small it is what you build, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel proud of your accomplishment. And that builds in our hobby, and it builds. And the further advanced you get, the more you learn. This hobby has got so many diversities: the electronics, electrical wiring, geology. How does the earth look? How does it form? The different colors of geology across various countries. all of that is quite an education in itself. Look at what we're doing, the podcasting and the technology of social media and how to blend that into our hobby. There are so many facets, so many interests, 3D printing. I mean, the list continues to grow with what it is you can do and make yourself feel proud and, in fact, create some worth where you have a side income, a part time job, something that not only you're spending your time on and spending your money on, but it can reward you with a nice payback. And that's something we didn't talk about, and that's the technology of 3D printing, how that has revolutionized the ability to get any type of model in any scale that you want.
Yeah, I mean, I've often said to people is, when they say, like, 3D printing, what is this? And I say, it's like when you watch Star Trek and they walk up to the wall and they say, Earl Grey hot, and it just appears. That this is we're in at the ground level. This is where the Star Trek replicator starts as 3D printing, and you think, well, when you think of it like that, and you see the advances even in such a relatively short space of time with these amazing models that they can just create out of this plastic string. It is amazing, and I can see that really making models that even a few years ago people wouldn't have contemplated being readily doable in small scale, will make them possible. And I've often seen it said that we're almost in a golden age of models at the moment, because the actual manufacturing technology, the finishing, the prints and the finish of the models have improved so much that we've never had it so good. But what I have noticed is that along with that, it seems to be that the availability of models has dramatically changed. I mean, I can remember as a child, you'd get a catalogue, and the models that were in the catalogue would remain available for sometimes several years. You didn't get a lot of choice, but they were always there. And now it seems if you don't order a model when it's announced, a lot of the time you'll miss out. And it's almost become like a wacky races that you've got to get your orders in quickly or you don't get it. I mean, do you see that happening in the US as well? And do you think that has changed the hobby in any way?
You're describing the old Wather's catalog of 1975, where the Athearn engines were the same 15 locomotives, and you could buy them in any road name, and they were always there. You could always get your DD35. You could always get your wide hood GP9. Now, what you describe as limited runs, back then they were made in the United States. If some of these models were obviously made in the United States with current incomes of what you need to eat and survive, these would be $1,000 plastic models apiece. They've taken advantage of the low production costs and the technology that they have in China and the Philippines and Vietnam and all these different countries where models are now being made. I mean, look at Rivarossi. They were always made in Austria, if I'm correct on that. So the models have been made all over the world at all times, but it just depends on what the pay scale is and how much it actually costs to create them that makes it affordable. They have also created limited runs by doing that. They've also created so much more variety. Now you can buy, I've got these Intermountain locomotives, which are brand new, fresh off the press. I'm going to grab one off the shelf here. And these do have motors in them. This is the latest, greatest from a company in the United States called Intermountain, and they are made in China. But the PTC antennas on top are specific to the road number of each locomotive. This is something that you could only do in brass models and metal fabrications back in the 90s, but now it's been brought to us in plastic because the cost of creating dies and molds and things like that have dropped dramatically because of the low prices in China, really is what I see that as. So now, yes, you can't get it because maybe they only make 300 of them. But at the same time, you've always got eBay out there where I think you can pretty much, even after it's sold out, you can still find them somewhere, if that makes any sense. Because before that, you'd have to go to the hobby shop or you'd have to go to a swap meet, and your ability to purchase stuff was only on where you could go physically. Now with the internet, if there's one in Australia that some guys got and you want it, it's just a matter of shipping and you can still buy it. So I think the availability, while it's limited runs, you can still get it if you really, really want it. But I got to be honest with you. There's nothing that I want that bad that if I miss out on it, it's going to break my heart. I'm just, yeah.
I must admit, I was looking at, I think they're Earthen models, and they're, I'm not an aficionado of US outline models, but they've got the printing on them. They have like the US flag and pictures of people. I'm trying to remember um, what it was called, but some of the printing finishes on some of these models are just truly awesome.
There's one with
Yeah, that's the one, isn't it? Yeah, with the US flag.
right, right, right. Union Pacific has been using the United States flag on all of their engines. I don't know if they own the trademark to that or if they can, but it's definitely patriotic is the
Yeah.
word that we would use in this country.
But I mean, the quality of the printing is absolutely astounding. But I want to ask you, it's something that we've struggled in the UK for quite a few decades, is the stereotypes, how people see railway rail fanners. Do you have the same thing in the US? And is that starting to change now? I know in the UK it's almost become considered cool. There's been this renaissance where we started to see it feature on television, and it's changed the public's perception of what it is we actually do. I mean, have you found something similar happening in the US?
No, because we don't have TV shows where it's mainstream. You guys have got that World's Greatest Challenge, the show that runs on Channel 5 over there
A
in the
Great
UK.
Model Railway Challenge.
Correct. And that has made the hobby more acceptable, where it doesn't look like a bunch of old guys playing with toy trains all by themselves in their basements, because that's the way it's viewed in this country. I know that because when Rod Stewart went on one of the late TV shows at night on mainstream television, Rod Stewart is a model railroader. He's got a layout. He's been featured in the magazines, and everybody knows that he's a person who's got a beautiful city, a great big layout, really, really nice layout. But when he got on TV and he said, "Yeah, I work with model trains," the audience started to chuckle. They started to laugh. When I was interviewed on TV back in the 90s, I was put on a news broadcast about my Midwest Valley Modelers layout. It was a very nice interview, but when the news commentators talked about me, they laughed through the entire presentation. Okay, now we're going to show a man that plays with model trains. And they literally giggled through the whole segment like I was some blasted idiot playing with toy trains. And I was insulted by that, I will tell you. That was my first taste of how the general public looks at us. They look at us as a bunch of overgrown children that never grew up. And and I'm okay with that because sticks and stones, I don't care. I love what I do, and there's nothing you can say to me that's going to affect how I view my artistry. I'm an artist. I
Yeah.
know what I'm creating is art. And among my peers that are in the hobby I'm in, we have great respect for each other. And I can survive on that just fine. I don't care what the general public thinks. I mean, I laugh at people that chase little golf balls around fields all day long. So, I mean, it works both ways.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I say to people is that what you've got to look at with any kind of model making, but in our hobby in particular, is there's a lot of transferable skills, and this is the argument that I use with people: is it's not about playing with toys. There's the artistic side of it. You wouldn't laugh at somebody like painting a masterpiece painting. If somebody's making a Constable watercolor of somewhere, you wouldn't be stood there laughing at him. But in some respects, that's what we're doing in 3 dimensions. But then when you get underneath that, there's things like the planning side of it. These are serious skills that are equally applicable to all walks of life. There's the woodworking skills, putting together these baseboards. That is equally transferable into home repairs, DIY, putting up shelves, the electronics and the electrics that are underneath. Understanding all of that and being able to do that means that you're better able to do things like repair household items that break. Instead of just tossing it out in the trash, you can repair things. Being able to accurately paint a wagon. You imagine you get an offender bender, somebody scratches your car with a shopping cart. You know how to fix that. You don't have to pay a guy hundreds of dollars to fix that. You know the techniques to do it. So there's all these transferable skills, and all of a sudden, the person you're talking to goes, "Oh, I never thought of it like that." It's the hobby. In some respects, maybe we've been guilty of not extolling our virtues enough. But certainly, in the UK, we've been helped a lot by these TV shows. It's become. I think people have seen beyond the stereotypes, and they've seen that. They've seen the creativity, the imagination, and also the actual skills that go into that. And we don't have this weird old men
Right.
playing trains sort of a mentality. It's a shame that we can't get that to the US, because they've franchised the Great Model Railway Challenge. They're doing a series in not Belgium, in the Netherlands. They've actually bought the format to make their own version. They've syndicated it to, I think it's been shown in Australia, it's been shown in Scandinavia. So hopefully we're getting the message out there that that there's more to us than counting rivets and noting down train numbers at the end of a platform somewhere.
God, you are so smart. I wish you were sitting right here in this chair next to me. I just want to hang out with you. You are so amazing. I want to be your friend. And we're so far away, I can't give you a high five or make you a nice cup of hot tea, which I would love to do for you right now. What you are saying, what you just said was, you nailed it. So amazingly intelligent. We could fix things. We can do anything we need from the skills that we've learned from this hobby. And yes, I've been talking with the folks that you put me in contact with to produce that show through email. We just can't find a mainstream channel in this country that will produce it or allow us to put it on our television screens.
I mean, it's something that perhaps you could do as a like a YouTube thing. Get the manufacturers involved and just do it ourselves.
That's what we're doing right now. I do it every single week. In all the shows I produce, I feel like I am doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
We did film a segment of what I would call a Great Model Railroad Challenge, where I bought 7 different Wathers buildings and I teamed up 14 people in groups of 2 to build the same exact building, and all 7 of them came out completely different. I never got through the edit on that. And one of the persons that was on that show, I can't really show on video due to the fact that we don't work together anymore. And so that whole thing got scrapped. So in order for me to make another Great Model Railroad Challenge, I would have to refilm another one with new buildings and new groups of people. I know how to do it. I know how to produce it. I know how to edit it. It's just a matter of working it into my schedule. But
Yeah.
we can do that now ourselves and put it on our own platform. But we're only going to have a viewership of my What's Neat show gets viewerships of between 19,000 and 50,000, 70,000 a month. The podcast that we do gets around 10 or 11,000 views during any one given month. So we don't really reach the audience that you can when you put it on Channel 5 out there in the UK, where you can reach the masses and make our hobby look accessible, make it look like an art. What you just described about the artistry, what we do is 3-dimensional art. When I design a photograph, and there's photographs hanging up all over the room, you can't really see any of them right now on this camera that I have. But when I approach a photograph, it's just like doing a painting, except for I'm not painting it, I'm building it 3-dimensionally, and all the pieces still have to be in the frame where they're supposed to be. Everything's got to be in the right position to look aesthetically correct and realistic. So we are painting 3-dimensionally. That's a whole nother level of art. I could literally do an art gallery with the hundreds of ad photos and photographs that I've created through the years to look very realistic. The plow in the farmland, plowing the field with the little boy and a dog standing on the side watching daddy run the tractor as the train goes by, the wire trees, the barn in the background, and the beautiful clouds. That's a painting. We're painting a moment in time that inspires people for memories and thoughts. So what I do is art. There's no doubt about it. And that's why I personally respected it, what I do. One ad I'll put in your head that you can see is the Bachmann Easy Track ad. From the carpet to your imagination, Bachmann Easy Track can take you there. I mean, that ad is timeless. It's been running in our model press. I did that ad back in 2001. That ad has been running for 21 years in our model press, and it's still current. It's still a relevant ad because that type of track is timeless. It doesn't go out of date. And the presentation was timeless. To have a piece of carpet in the foreground with the raw track on it, and then the background turns into a super realistic looking scenery with hikers in the bush and the trees and the clouds and the ballast. You're showing that the track could be used for the most basic carpet round the room layout, and it still can be used on an advanced, beautifully scenic layout. That's a timeless ad that has sold millions and millions of dollars of product. With all the advertising photos that I've done through the years, I can truly tell you that I have sold tens of millions of dollars worth of trains through my art for the manufacturers that have discovered my art, and they also discover that it works. It gives them a positive brand. It makes their company look polished and nice because it's professional. I'm literally a one-man band that has sold an awful lot of models to a lot of people.
Talking about models, I know that the What's Neat This Week podcast, and it has its own branded box cars. I was really intrigued.
Oh yeah, look at that. We have some of those here. Yes, I got some of those right here. Check them out.
So
We have, there's a guy in Missouri that has a printer that he can print freight cars, literally print it. And he had his own freight cars made. And he's made 5 different kinds of What's Neat boxcars for us. And I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of them that we have sold. Some people weather them up very realistically and they send them to me, or they send me photographs of them. Here's one
wow.
that started out like this, and look at what he's done to it. I mean, this is another artist making it look like a real live freight car. I love the fact that we have those to help us brand our show. And there's a new one coming out. The gentleman that makes these cars told me that I'll see a new one in the next month or so that he's designing. And people buy them. People love to run them on their layouts. One guy made a billboard on his layout. He took what's the company that makes the brass bridges that are on my layout? I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, they make amazing looking signals. They make billboards, and he's got a What's Neat podcast billboard on his layout. So yeah, people that watch the show, it works exactly the way I want it to work. I want people to feel like it's their show. I want them to feel like that we are their friends, because we are. We're all in this together. And I want it to feel like you're going to your hobby shop on a Friday night, relaxing with the other customers and exchanging ideas on what's new, what you're working on. What have you been working on, Mike? I don't know. I've been working on these auto racks. And it's just like a group conversation, a group fun time where you can get away from your real world, your stressful job, your relationships, your children, whatever it is, where you need a break to have your own time, your own space where you can just enjoy thinking about your hobby with us as we show you with a smile what's new, what we've discovered this week, what we've been working on this week. Maybe what I'm working on is something that you want to work on next week. Well, here's some tips on how to go about getting to that point. I want it to bring people pleasure. As long as we make people happy and we bring them pleasure, which sounds really corny, I know that, but providing we do that and we stay away from the politics of the day and all those other things that make people upset and angry, I think we're going to keep winning, and we'll keep drawing more people in and attracting an audience in a positive way. There are people that have literally wanted to just send us money. How can I help you guys with your show? One guy sent me a FedEx envelope and it had $200 in it. He wrote us a check and said, I just want to give you this because you make me feel so good. I wanted to give this to you to help you guys with what you're doing. I mean, that is love. I mean, it makes me want to cry because it's so amazing how we've touched people's lives in a positive way, that they're willing to work hard on their job and then send us what it is they've earned for us.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's what I found as well with the Monday Club that I do is that sense of community. People feel that they belong to it, and it's something I really like about the What's Neat This Week show is that it's like you as the viewer are there with you guys, and it's such a great format for making people feel part of the community, making people feel welcome, involved, and certainly more so, I guess, now than ever before with the COVID that we've had, where people can't go to shows, they can't meet up with friends, that they can't go to the model clubs because they're just not operating. It's become so important, and I always feel honored, like you say, that people will take time out of their day to spend time with you when the shows on, to watch the shows, to consume your videos, enjoy them, leaving comments saying how much they've enjoyed it, and like you say as well, donating money to help keep the show going, to help us invest in equipment, to help us keep producing new content. And I feel so humbled that people do that. And with the What's Neat This Week podcast, I see that you've got that kind of, it's almost like a club. Everybody feels welcome in the clubhouse with you guys, and it's what I've tried to kind of model myself on as well.
Oh, it's worked. It's worked. I love you, Jennifer. I love watching your show. I feel like you're my sister. You are my friend. When I watch your show, it's not intimidating. You're not ever insulting. You're always so warm and humble. I just want to cook you a hot cup of tea and sit down here and drink it with you and talk to you about the latest model that we've both been working on. Your show has got that same feel-good aspect to it that draws people to it. I mean, my wife watches your show. She loves it.
Oh wow! Thank you ever so much.
She doesn't watch all my shows. She watches your show. Because another thing that you've done, and we've tried to do this, if you look at the last 8 shows that we've done, 6 of those shows, we've had wonderful gals, wonderful women on the show, because it shows that little girl that's next to dad in the shop, hey, look, this isn't just a boy's hobby. This is an artistry that I can do too. And I want that out there. And that's what you bring to the hobby, is that you show that you can be a wonderful girl and still be an awesome modeler and friend at the same time.
That's one of the things that we've had in the UK, where as the public perception has changed and we've kind of dispelled those stereotypes, what I have certainly noticed is that a lot more women have kind of felt okay to admit that they enjoy making railway models, that there doesn't have to be this very strict gender divide.
Right.
And I suppose if you could look at things like Great Model Railway Challenge, before that, Biggest Little Railway, what it's actually done is got a lot more women, I wouldn't say into the hobby, but prepared to admit that they're into the hobby. So now when I go to shows, we're starting to see families, well, certainly we were before COVID, full families. And it's not just like dad wants to go to the show and the rest of the family get dragged along. Everybody is enjoying it and able to feel that it's okay to enjoy it. And I get contacted by so many women who just say thank you for making it okay for women to admit that they like making models, because going back to what we talked about before, it's another form of art. Women paint paintings, women do sculpture, so why can't they do railway modeling? It's a lot of women getting into engineering, and this is just like miniature engineering.
Absolutely right. And what guy wouldn't want to meet a girl that shares the same hobby? I mean, Ray and Renee Grosser, perfect example here in the United States. They used to travel together to all the train shows with a very large modular layout that they had built together with a few friends. And so the group would go to shows. They did 50 or 75 shows with this nostalgic Sioux Line railroad that they had built. And Renee would build the most beautiful farmhouses, scratch built, to the equivalent of the very, very best modelers that were out there. I mean, every downspout, every window pane, everything, every curtain in the windows. This woman nailed it. But how awesome it would be to be a man and wife couple sharing the same experience of the hobby together. It actually might be expensive and almost too much. There is that wanting to have a divide and a break from your partner once in a while. But I think that would also be a great experience for people to be able to share the hobby together as a couple. That's something that you really don't see a lot of, but when you do see it, it works. You've got Stephen Priest and Cynthia Priest. She edits the NMRA Bulletin, and Stephen was a very prolific modeler. Another great couple together that enjoy the hobby. On our show recently, we've had Ashley and Ray, Ray's brother-sister team. And they also enjoy rail fanning together. And she's a cake decorator, so she's got already instinctive artist skills that lend themselves well to our hobby. And she's outwardly admitted that on the show. It brings people pleasure when you've got a group like that, a man and wife, or just two partners that enjoy the same hobby together. I think that's magic. That's kumbaya, and that's what it's all about.
It is great. But look, thank you ever so much for taking the time out to having a chat with us. It's been great to kind of get an insight into Ken Patterson and what's neat this week. So thank you ever so much. And just quickly, let everybody know, where can they find what's neat this week if they want to go back, watch the older shows, but also be there for when the new shows go up as well.
Okay, the What's Neat show is on Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine's YouTube site, and that's the show where we get our hands dirty. We've produced 100 of those shows, and there's an index for those shows that you can find out what the subject matter is of every one of those shows. The podcast itself is on my Ken Patterson YouTube site, and that's called What's Neat This Week in Model Railroading. We've produced 145 of those shows to date. And that's where it's the group of guys, you're meeting people, you're seeing what's new every single week in the hobby. What's the latest news? What's going on with shows? How is COVID affecting our hobby? And who's been working on what this week? There's 2 different shows, 2 different sites on YouTube, but I'm sure you could Google either one of them and find us. And we absolutely welcome your participation. When we do a live show, I'm looking forward to having that live readers' feedback, which will be interesting to try to keep up with. But you can always leave your comments in the YouTube readers' feedback. We read every one of them. We've also got a What's Neat This Week Facebook page, which is another form of social media that we use here big time. So yeah, rock and roll. A lot of different ways to watch us, a lot of different ways to reach us, Jennifer.
Brilliant. And also, if people are interested in picking up one of those What's Neat This Week boxcars, where can they go to find those?
You can find those at valuetrainsusa.com. I cannot believe I remembered that. Really nice guy builds these. valuetrainsusa.com is where you can find those.
Well, look, thank you ever so much, and I hope to catch you again, and I will be watching the next What's Neat this week. So look, thanks very much for joining us. You take care. Don't forget to tickle that like button and share this video too. And if you haven't already done so, do consider subscribing to the channel to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And a big thank you to Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories, and Railroads of Sheffield, your one-stop shop for US outline modelling in the UK, for helping make this video possible. And we've got some links in the description box down below for you. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, wishing you well. Take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Until next time, bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. And Railroads of Sheffield, your one-stop shop for US outline modelling in the UK. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107107, George Botterini, Andy Finch, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, John N from NC, and NYMR-ish. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.